nice and sharp. I want to get to work right away if I get the chance. Good luck. Yours truly, Jack the Ripper.
The murders became famous. Once the name Jack the Ripper had been invented, they became a total sensation.
Polly Nichols was murdered on the 31st of August 1888, and on that particular day she'd had 3 customers, but she'd spent the money on gin. So when she turned up at the lodging house to get a bed for the night, not only was she drunk, but she didn't have any money for a bed, but she felt pretty confident about getting a 4th customer because she thought she looked particularly attractive. And the reason she thought she looked so attractive was because she was wearing a new hat. I mean, she was drunk, she got 5 front teeth missing, but she was wearing this new hat. The last words of the lodging house keeper were, "See what a jolly bonnet I'm wearing."
August the 31st, 1888 was the first Ripper murder. Mary Ann Nichols, known as Polly, a streetwalker in her early 40s, was found dead in Bucks Row, Whitechapel, at approximately 3:45 in the morning. She had been dead approximately 20 minutes when she was found, and in the mortuary they discovered that not only had her throat been cut, but there was a great gash in her abdomen.
You can see that journalists were absolutely responsible for part of the fear and the fervour. When you look at the papers of the time, you see the lurid front-page illustrations on police news and equally lurid treatment of the subject on the inside. Even the Times fell for it. Even the Times was swept away by Ripper fervour and Ripper fever.
A nameless reprobate.
Half beast, half man is at large.
Deadly, cunning.
Insatiable thirst for blood.
Whitechapel thieves strikes again.
You can have situations where the murderer's standing here, the victim's lying there, the murderer's covered in the victim's blood, he's left his fingerprints and handprints all over the murder scene. There's no way you could combine the two. The scientific knowledge didn't exist for that to happen. So literally, you have got to catch the murderer in the act of murder.
On the 8th of September 1888, at 10 to 6 in the morning, the second victim was found. She had been kicked out of her nearby lodging house at midnight for not having the money she needed to pay for her bed. She expected to earn it, but clearly didn't find it, as she was last seen alive at 5:15, negotiating with a client who was probably Jack the Ripper on the pavement outside number 29 Hanbury Street. Her throat had been cut, she had been savagely mutilated, disemboweled, and her uterus taken away.
If ever the Ripper was going to be caught, it was then. Because they're out in the backyard and a man in the next door house comes down to the yard, obviously to relieve himself, because this is what the yards were used for. And he's standing there and he hears something fall against the fence and a woman's voice say, "No." Now the fence is only 5 foot high. All he's got to do is look over the fence and he would have seen Chapman with her killer, with the Ripper.
The police next turned their sights on doctors who performed amputations and surgery. Perhaps the killer who extracted organs from his victims was a doctor.
It is apparently an amputation knife, a late 19th century amputation knife. And certainly it's the sort of weapon which could have done the murders.
On September 29, a note arrived, purportedly from the killer himself. The signature was brilliant.
It seems silly now, although I'm sure the intention was well meant. Notice was given out advising the prostitutes to stay off the street.
24 hours later, the worst fears of the police were realized.
The first victim that night was Elizabeth Stride, nicknamed Long Liz. She had been seen hustling for trade up and down a little road called Berners Street in the East End during the evening from 11 p.m. Her body was found at about 1 o'clock in Dutfield's Yard, a little opening off Berners Street. Her throat had been cut, but she'd not been mutilated, and it is thought that the Ripper may have been frightened off by hearing Diemschutz's pony and trap approaching. The second murder on the night of the double murders was that of Catherine Eddowes. Her body was found at about 1:45 in Mitre Square in the City of London. She had been appallingly mutilated, her throat cut, V's cut in her cheeks pointing up to the eyes, her eyelids nicked through, the tip of her nose cut off, and the usual ripping and abdominal mutilation, with her uterus and one kidney taken away by the murder.
George Lusk, head of the Whitechapel Vigilante Committee, received a letter posted from hell, probably from the real killer, and the envelope contained parts of a human kidney.
Mr. Lusk, sir, I send you half a kidney I took from one woman, preserved it for you. T'other piece I fried and ate it, was very nice. I may send you the bloody knife that took it out, if you'll only wait a while longer. Catch me when you can, Mr. Lusk.
On the night of the 8th, 9th of November, it's rainy, she's out on the street, she's looking for customers. She picks one up around about midnight, takes him back to her room, and one of the other prostitutes sees her drawing the curtains of her room, and as she did so, Kelly is singing a music hall song. It was only a violet I plucked from my mother's grave. Around about 3:30 in the morning, she picks up the Ripper. Some people living in Miller's Court hear a faint cry of murder. It's almost certain that it was at that point that the Ripper, lying on the bed beside Mary Kelly, throws the sheet over her head and makes his first thrust through the sheet with a knife. And he has several hours to work over.
She had been absolutely savagely mutilated, almost cut to pieces, her abdomen entirely emptied and the contents left scattered around on the bed beside her. Pieces of flesh had been left on a table beside the bed. Her heart had been extracted from her thorax, and it is possible, from the way the doctor described this, that that was taken away.
There is the photograph of the murder. She's lying on the bed facing the window. You can just see the puff sleeves of her chemise. This is what confronts the police when they get there to begin the investigation.
News of Mary Kelly's savage death stunned the world. Mary Kelly alarmed Buckingham Palace and greatly distressed Queen Victoria. She promptly telegrammed her Prime Minister with an urgent message. This new, most ghastly murder shows the absolute necessity for some very decided action. All the courts must be lit and our detectives improved. Who exactly was the man who kept an entire city in mortal fear and the rest of the world on pins and needles waiting for his capture, waiting for a name to be put to him?